All right, welcome back to Inside College Basketball now with Jon Rothstein. Pleased to be welcomed by UConn head coach Dan Hurley, two-time national champion. Dan, how much Jersey Shore time is in your future here as you round out the summer?
Nice. That's a good thought. I'm going to get some in August. We finish up. We had 8 great weeks with the guys this summer. 8 hard weeks. With the team, and then we start school pretty early here, like the end of the month. So we're gonna get about like 10 days. I think some of those days will definitely be, Spring Lake, Seagirt, definitely Jersey Shore.
Now, one of the things I know you love to do when you're at peace at the Jersey Shore is read. And coming up now in the next couple of months, people are going to be reading your book with Ian O'Connor. The name of the book is Never Stop. When did Dan Hurley, the coach, decided to become Dan Hurley, the author?
Well, I think it was, listen, I've always had a love of books and a love of reading. This is like post Seton Hall. I didn't really like to read much.
Yeah.
Like as a student, like assigned reading. I was, I struggled in college. So I would say, post college, and I just developed a love of reading and writing. I journal every morning. I try to read for 45 minutes, to an hour every day. So I wake up super early to kind of, get those things, done as part of my like daily routine before, you're taking on the role of leading this, UConn program. So, after we won the second championship, and you're looking at your life and your career and your life in basketball, and you're approached by a couple different publishing houses and people that want to do the project. For me, it was like I've got a compelling story. A lot of the book is it's about my triumphs and some of my struggles and the path to get to where I am today as a coach at UConn. So hopefully the book inspires people and motivates people, or is just a fun, interesting story of someone that's overcome a lot to accomplish some things.
Well, I read the book, and it's a quick read. I got through it in about a day and a half. But I'm curious, you and your family have been the subject of a lot of media attention throughout the years. From your perspective, how was putting everything into a book different than being the subject of a documentary?
Well, I think you're in total, control of your own words. Ian O'Connor is somebody that I've covered my career. Unfortunately for him, he covered the Seton Hall days and my high school days, so he's seen like the basketball arc as a player and as a coach. And I think I had no idea that the book writing process was going to be as arduous as it's been. The amount of times I've read the book and changed things or added things or changed one or two words because in my mind it didn't tell the full story. And then I would say like there's a lot of personal things in there, things from your childhood, your marriage, all these different parts of your life that sometimes you sit there after you read it and said, should I have been this honest?
Dan, you were very hard on yourself in this book, which anybody who knows you knows that's not a surprise, but especially when it came to your playing career. But talking to people who coached you at Seton Hall and people who competed against you when you were a player, they talked about how good you were as a player, as a high school player in New Jersey, and also in the Big East. Do you think you would look back and feel differently about your playing career if your brother wasn't Bobby Hurley, who was one of the best college point guards of all time?
Yeah, well, playing the comparison game, it wreaks havoc on, your mental well-being and your, how you feel about yourself and, the image of yourself that you hold. And, I just spent so many years of my life, whether it was, as a player in high school and in college, or even as a young coach, the shadow of my dad. I think, just finding myself clear of playing that vicious game of comparison does wonders for your mindset.
But if you look at it now, your brother was obviously a great point guard at Duke, one of the best ever. Your dad's in the Hall of Fame, but you're the one that won back-to-back national titles in dominant form. And if you think about it, in the modern era, 3 coaches have won back-to-back national titles: Mike Krzyzewski, Billy Donovan, and you. And your run at UConn in 23 and 24 was by far the most dominant run out of any of those teams that went back-to-back. When was Dan Hurley able to give himself credit for the coach that he is?
Um, I mean, you get these moments, I think, along the way. First of all, John, too, that's like a good list right there, huh?
Pretty good.
Coach K and Billy D. Yeah, I mean, it's not, I don't think that you ever necessarily find yourself in those types of thoughts in a job like this as a college head coach. I mean, this is the type of business that, if you take your foot off the gas for a second, whether it's recruiting or your day in and day out culture of your program with your staff and your players, or if your foot is not on the gas trying to get better as a leader and a coach and all the different aspects of being a coach, the art of the whole thing. I mean, you're gonna have a hard time continuing anywhere near that level of success. So for me, it's like, I may hear a song while I'm driving, or I may play a song that brings me back to some music I was listening to, in Houston when we won the first one, or I may, watch One Shining Moment when I got 3 minutes left in a cardio workout when I'm tired at the end of it and I got to run hard the last 3 minutes, and I'll watch the 24 One Shining Moment. So you give yourself a little bit of an opportunity from time to time, but this job keeps you moving.
The name of the book is called Never Stop, Dan Hurley with Ian O'Connor. It's a fascinating read. It's a fast read. It's going to be out this fall. Dan Hurley, UConn coach, joining Jon Rothstein here on Inside College Basketball Now. Now, we spend a lot of time, obviously, in this book, and you've done it as well, talking about your shortcomings in your own mind as a player. But then you and your wife went through something really, really difficult, and I thought this was an interesting part of your story. When you were starting out as young professionals and there was a fire in your house and you lost precious things to you and your family, what was it like to endure that as a young couple?
Yeah, I mean, as a young couple, I'm a young coach. We're a young couple with with a newborn son, and you're at a challenging point. Even if you're not dealing with some type of catastrophe, relative to your finances, which you're now going to find yourselves heavily in debt, because of not having the proper coverage, because you're a young couple and you don't know exactly what the hell you're doing. And then just being young in a relationship, we got married young, and I'm an assistant at Rutgers University, trying to balance life and a marriage and being a dad with your own desires for your your career and how you're going to take care of your family. So that was that's where I think just with with writing the book and doing a project like this, there's tons of young couples like in and out of sports that experiencing the same things, and we were eventually able to get through it.
But you also displayed in this book how you were such a great recruiter out of a gate when you were courting your wife, because on your first date, you ordered a pizza with no cheese on it. How much has that come up over the years?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just a guy from Jersey City, so we weren't exactly like a trail of rose petals to the kitchen table set up with candles and and love songs. So, or classical music. So, I'm a Jersey guy, Jersey City guy. I think, I was rough around the edges when I met my wife. I'm still a little bit rough around the edges. She's helped me a lot, transform, at least until, to what I am, today. But my wife, from the day I met her, she's made me better, and she's made me want to be better, in every way. So she's been just, the key person in my life.
And obviously, she's been a big part of this ride for you through college coaching, multiple national championships. And she was right there with you last year when you had to make a difficult decision whether or not to coach the Lakers. Something interesting, Dan, that I thought in this book is you told the story about how when you were weighing everybody in your circle in on the Lakers situation, your dad vehemently said, "You have to go." What was it like to hear him say that with complete definitive nature?
Well, he said that a lot. I mean, the thing with my dad is, like, at different points in my career, and I think with Bob too, and coaching, I think, he's advised us, to make the move, or, to take the bigger job.
Right.
And he never did.
Yeah.
You know, so, I always took any of my dad's advice on some of, like, on career, advancement with a heavy grain of salt, because he never left. He never left St. Anthony. So, yeah, I get a lot of advice from my dad, relative to my team and tactics and player development, and maybe rotation,
Mhm.
and maybe culture. But the one thing I don't listen to Bob Hurley Sr. about is how to advance my career, because my dad, he never left his high school when he could have coached at any level.
Did you think you were going to have a deja vu type situation when the Knicks parted ways with Tom Thibodeau?
No, not even a small part of me. I think when you're coming off, the year that we had, I think, you're every thought, and it's hard to turn off. I think, for most of us, in that are coaching at the level, that I'm coaching at this level of sport. I don't think your mind very rarely drifts from your team,
Mhm.
your program, your players, where things are headed, especially when you're coming off of, a season like we had. So that, yeah, that was never even never even a thought, really.
Dan, is coaching in the NBA something you'd still like to try one day, or do you feel like the exercise with the Lakers showed you that, you're best suited for college?
Yeah, I love college. I think, when you really look in the mirror, and, there's obviously different responsibilities, at both levels, whether it's college, or the NBA level, maybe in a weird way. I may be a better fit. When UConn's had enough of me, maybe I'll coach in the Euro League or something. When I'm 60, or whatever, and I'm I want to try something else, maybe at that point in my career or whatever. Maybe I end up, coaching in the Euro League, or something. But I think for me, my strength is leading an organization and setting a tone, and a standard, and holding everyone, my staff, my players, to that standard every single day. And so I think, the impact that I can have that way at the college level, the impact you can have on 18, 19, 22-year-old lives, and the legacy for me piece, the opportunity to continue to chase championships here, both in the Big East, and trying to, get back in position, to potentially win a third.
Dan, I talked about this a lot with Jay Wright when he was at Villanova. And now, he's our colleague here at CBS. And he would always talk about when he had NBA opportunities, he thought about the intrigue of taking them. But then he realized if he had to take an NBA job, he would have to leave Villanova. And he didn't want Villanova because Villanova was the job that he had and loved. And he never knew if he could get it back. Have you developed that same type of affinity for UConn, given your Northeast roots and the success that you've had?
Yeah, I think the thing with Jay too is like I don't even think you realize like when you are somewhere, Jay's probably talking about that in retrospect. Like I don't really, I don't drive home, after just maybe a summer workout or a preseason practice, or I just got finished up with a recruiting visit. I generally don't. I generally don't drive home and think about like how much I love UConn.
Right.
But I think, when you do have those moments where you reflect on how much it's meant to your life, like how coming to UConn as an opportunity for me to challenge myself to see if I'm an elite coach, to challenge myself to see if I could, become a championship coach. When you're sitting on the beach in Spring Lake and you're listening to some music, and I think you'll reflect on like the UConn has changed my life in a way that you know that you'll never coach anywhere else.
Right.
And yeah.
The name of the book is Never Stop, Dan Hurley with Ian O'Connor. It is available on Amazon. I've read it. It's a quick read. It's a fun read. It's going to be all over the place this fall as Dan Hurley promotes this book, Never Stop, before the 25-26 season. John Rothstein here with Dan Hurley on Inside College Basketball Now. Well, let's get right now to the state of the UConn Huskies. Dan, Daryl Hannah said in the movie Wall Street that when you've had money and lost it, it's much worse than never having it at all. What was it like for you to watch the Final Four this year after going the 2 years prior and dominating the tournament?
Yeah, I mean, I was away. I was as far away, I was as far away from San Antonio as I could possibly get. I kind of waited for the weekend, and me and my wife got away on an escape. We kind of were able to do enough with the roster where we felt like we could take a weekend. Mm-hmm. So I watched it on my tablet, with a great view of a beach, and so it was a much different experience for me. I would say that the whole year, it's like when you go back to back, especially the way that we won it the second year, I think in your mind, you just think that you're supposed to win it again. Yeah. And I decided to skip San Antonio and just go away and recharge and reflect on a year and just try to get some restorative time, because the year, I think, definitely, it was a frustrating year. It was a taxing year, and it didn't, it didn't play out in a manner that you were convinced it was going to. Like you win 2 in a row and you dominate. Any other year that doesn't go like that or feel like that from here on out, it's a terrible experience.
It's been well documented. You've documented it, just that last year's team was not up to the same standard as the teams in 23 and 24. But with that said, you had Florida, the team that won the national title, on the ropes in the second round, and you had a very poor shooting day. Do you take pride that you were still that close to the eventual national champion, or does it just make it that much more brutal that you didn't win that game?
Yeah, second thing. Brutal every time. Or not every time, but I'll probably pick brutal like 80% of the time, maybe 85. But I mean, it was frustrating. I think when you go back, and I just kind of finished, obviously chronologically going back through the season, it's always an exercise I like to take in July and into the beginning of August. I just think it's healthy for me, to study the way we played and to learn from the good and the bad, and to see the way that the season developed. It was frustrating that we were close to competing longer, for the Big East, regular season. We had a couple games that we lost late that we should have won, that would have kept us around longer. Obviously, when you look at Maui, if you just go 1-2 there, for us, I would say there was just like a 3-game difference that was very controllable, that probably would have made us a 5 or a 6 seed in the NCAA tournament. We were maddeningly close while dealing with obviously Liam's injury, and then Hassan Diarra playing banged up at the point guard spot, where we were already playing Aiden out of position, and Ahmad's going to be a really good player, but was still just a freshman. You kick yourself even more because you were that close, and you felt like you didn't do a good job as a coach of putting it together. And then I don't think it was obviously my finest year coaching.
Well, you're going to get another crack at it here in 25-26. Give me your impression so far of the roster you've put together for the upcoming season.
Yeah, I think it's a lot for me, more like the 23 team, where I do think it's it's a strength in numbers. It's I think the depth is what's going to make it make it potentially a championship team or a special season for us, where like that battle with our top 10 players, you're going to have to do the things that we didn't do last year, or else you're just not going to stay on the court. So we obviously had major defensive issues last year. We had rebounding issues at times. I think obviously the health and some of the things that we tried to do at point guard this year, I think with Demery and Malachi Smith, and Alec, Norlander, and Jacob Furphy, who's got some ability to play over there at 6'5 plus. I think we can rectify a lot of our defense and rebounding. And I think the quality we've got at point guard, can solve some of those things from last year. Because if you don't defend for us this year, or rebound the ball the way UConn has built its championship identity on, you're not going to play. And last year, players got minutes, that didn't guard anywhere near the level that we need them to guard at.
Well, the point guard spot brings me to my next question. And I've told you that I feel like your season is built to mirror Rocky III. And in that movie, there's a famous scene where Apollo is getting ready to train Rocky, and he says, the way to get it back is to go back to the beginning. And if you look at the best teams you've had as a college coach, one common theme has been great size at the lead guard spot. Jeff Doughton at Rhode Island, Tristan Newton at UConn. Why is Silas Demery Jr., the transfer from Georgia, next in line to join that company?
Yeah, I mean, that size for us, at that position. And, it's critical. I think it's critical in the sport, for everyone, to get as much length out there on the court. The guys, the Jeff Doughtons, the Tristan Newtons, for us have, been excellent two-way players that also are all over, the defensive glass and the offensive glass. For us, we turn, all of our perimeter players loose on the offensive glass, and then the reads that they've got to make for how we play. Where we consistently put our guards in position, I think, with what we run in the half court, to be getting downhill at the rim. And I think, just this past year, in the past, we've had, those big guards with the size to finish at the rim. They've had the size to throw those lob passes to our centers, to our lob centers, or spray it out to the 3-point line. And it takes, bigger perimeter people, to be able to see all three things or do all three things. And I think that, Silas brings those elements, and he's a guy with, I think, a chip on his shoulder. He was not a guy that was, overrated as a high school player. He's a guy that I think, is a blue collar player. And I think that's a great fit for the UConn brand, because this is a blue collar, blue blood.
One of the things that I think was underrated nationally about your team last season was the jump that Solo Ball made, making 99 threes and, becoming such a reliable threat from three-point range. If that was the jump that he made from a freshman to a sophomore, what could be in store as he goes from a sophomore to a junior?
Yeah, I think the whole thing for Solo is I don't know that I don't think his scoring is probably going to go up. Go up a whole lot because it's a deep team, and we're going to have a cluster of players. I think from you're going to have 7 players that maybe average between 7 or 8 points and 14 or 15 points. So I mean, we need. I think I think his efficiency, it's crazy when you talk about a guy that shot in the low 40s from 3 at high volume, that he could shoot better, but I think he could shoot 45, 46, 47% from 3 at the same type of volume. But I think his guard skills, I think, will be better on display. His finishing at the rim, his facilitating and playmaking as a guard, not as a shooter scorer. And then we need a big jump at the defensive end. This is a guy that, measures out, at 6'3.5" and bare feet with crazy long, crazy length. So I think he's the type of guy that this year, we need him to take those other steps. And I think he could, be one of the best guards in the country.
You had a great freshman last year in Liam McNeely. You have another great freshman this year in Braylon Mullins. How do they compare in terms of their readiness to affect college basketball as a freshman, which is getting harder and harder to do in this climate?
Yeah, I think with Bray, it's, it starts at home, with Josh and Katie and how he was raised and where he was raised in just in his community. He's just a serious guy, and I think he's a pretty simple guy with a small circle of people, and a guy that he kind of old school. He's just a ball player. He's not on social trying to build his brand that way. He just wants to shoot hoops, play ball. He's a pretty physical player. He's physically, I think, pretty strong. And he's not just this guy, he's got deep threes and crazy range, and he's an exciting, fun player because he could also play above the rim, but I think, I think he could pass too. And I think he's tough and competitive, so he'll guard for us. So, and he's going to be insulated by, some really strong upperclassmen too. Like you'd mentioned, Solo playing next to him on the wing with a junior who's won a national championship and is also an accomplished player is going to be really good for his for his calmness and his psyche.
He's also going to play next to Alex Caravan, who was a starter on multiple national title teams, and he's also going to play up front with Teras Reed, who's going to anchor the center spot. Braylon Mullins is one part of that, starting lineup projection I know that a lot of people are looking at, but Reed is another. And Dan, when you really dive into his production when he stays on the floor, when his usage is in excess of 20 to 25 minutes, he's a 14-9-2 guy, but a lot of times he has trouble staying on the floor because of foul trouble. How do you guys keep Teras Reed on the floor more in 25-26?
Yeah, I mean, listen, Teras, he's a total freak. We just measured him. I think he was 6'10", almost 6'10.5" in bare feet. He's 268, but he would win all the agility. He would win all the agility drills versus people that could really move on the perimeter. So this guy is just a total freak of nature in one of these ways, these crazy defensive ends in the NFL. Someone his size, should not move like he moves. The guy is so talented that I just think at times, all of those physical gifts, he loses concentration and focus. But I do think we saw a maturity from him last year at a lot of points. If you would have said to me a couple months into the season, would us two definitely be together for a last year? He probably had some questions about me, and I probably had some questions, about Teras. But I would say, December, as January turned into February and the level that this guy could play at, I think he could be, he's in the running for, potentially a small handful of best centers in the country next year. And if we hit it right, with techniques and fundamentals and discipline, identity, gets that motor playing at the level that it's got to rev at every single possession, and wants to be that guy. There's few players in the country that could match his physical talent.
And to have a presence like that, obviously, in the NCAA tournament would be a game changer for any team. And I know that UConn is always building towards March, but UConn this year in November and December is going to be handing out presents early for its fan base because you have put together the best non-conference schedule in UConn basketball history. You got BYU in the TD Garden, 2 games at MSG, one against Illinois the day after Thanksgiving, another against Florida in the Jimmy V Classic, which is a battle of the last 2 national champions. You're at Kansas in an epic home-and-home series, and then you have Arizona and Texas in Connecticut. What is it like to get ready for a schedule like this in the non-conference?
Yeah, I just think it's awesome. I think it's, it's the perfect way. It's the way that we've wanted to do it really since, since we got here, even when we were kind of rebuilding this thing and still on our ass a little bit. We still were out hunting for for those great single matchups. And it didn't take the meltdown in Maui for me to move in this direction. Like we were done with MTEs, even if we won Maui. Obviously we did the opposite of winning Maui. We completely lost Maui. We were the biggest loser in Maui. But this was the vision, to get to a point where we were able to play, based on how we project, our conference to be, or whether we stay at 20 games or go back to 18 games at some point to create better flexibility for people to schedule the way they need to on a year-to-year basis based on where your program's at. I just think it only helps you. It gives you these chances to really, I don't want to say move the needle, even though it's only November. But those games are like, if you win them, those are major resume boosters. You don't have to win all of them. Obviously, now you're putting yourself in a position where it's hard to win any of them because they're all the top programs. But you're trying to get eyes. You're trying to get people's attention on college basketball outside of just March Madness, which is the biggest or the second biggest yearly sporting event that we have in America is March Madness. It's the second biggest thing we have in all of sports. So, but we're trying to get attention in November and December. And who's not going to be excited about UConn and BYU at TD Bank in Boston with the team they got, and AJ and the UConn brand playing there. I mean, games like that are awesome. And we're trying to, and we're getting great conversations, I think, with other top programs to try to, keep getting even, games that aren't on our schedule yet, keep getting the top brands to play against each other.
TD Garden is obviously special for you and the UConn fan base because of that epic Elite Eight win over Illinois in 2024. UConn has always made an effort to play at MSG. Moving forward under your stewardship, is playing a game annually in Boston something that you want to do?
Yeah, that would be fun. Just the the memories, when you're in a place and what the building felt like. Obviously, the proximity to stores, the amount of alumni, in this northeastern corridor, into obviously all throughout New England too. I mean, it's we were able to kind of take over that building, and I think that's going to be an electric atmosphere that day. But we love, obviously, the home and homes, we really want to be able to have, 3 or 4 of those kind of good ones on a yearly basis, and then 2 neutrals, and if we could play at MSG where our fans love it and we've had a lot of success, we definitely want to be there too.
Well, you're going to be at MSG for the Big East tournament as you are every year, and you're also going to be playing St. John's there this year, as well as a game in Connecticut. Given the last couple of years between these two programs, what do you think those games are going to be like in 25-26 with both teams expected to be so potent this year?
Yeah, the better teams. I mean, the teams at the top of the food chain. I mean, those games there's always a little bit of extra, the electricity, the tension, the intensity of those games. There's definitely something extra there. We're for us too. It was a different environment for us to be playing in St. John's at MSG. This past year was actually, like a real road game, or
Right.
whereas those other games that we've played versus St. John's at MSG, or even the Big East tournament the year before, felt like neutrals.
Yeah.
Felt like neutrals, and obviously we had the better team. And when your team's playing better, the crowd is louder because you're dunking or hitting threes. So yeah, I mean those are those are exciting games, and those are games. You've got to have a monotonous ability to approach every opponent, with the same preparation and desperation, because every game, I mean, we were hurt more this past year in bad losses affected our seeding, where we actually had, enough pretty good wins. But yeah, those games, those are the ones you're definitely ready for.
I've been asking a lot of coaches this next question, and I spent a lot of time talking about it with you over the years, because coaches always remember their most difficult losses much more than their greatest wins. Now, I want you to give me one loss that always sticks with you and one win that always sticks with you, and you can't say any of the victories that you had in the Final Four.
Yeah, I mean, can I let me start with the positive first. That'll throw people off. It's crazy. For me, I would say year 5 at Rhodey, we played Davidson at home, and it was like I was in year 5 there. Rhode Island hadn't been to the NCAA tournament since Lamar Odom played there, and
Yeah.
I don't know where we're at on the meter, but I think the meter was at like 18 or 19 years since Rhode Island had been in the tournament. And
Right.
that was like, I think, senior day, or it was a late game that year, that if we lost it at home, we had zero chance of an at-large, and it would have put the team in a very bad mental space heading to Pittsburgh. So, like winning that game, and it was like a little bit of I think a come from behind win too, to get it. That win was like huge in the momentum that we had. Then going to Pittsburgh and winning the Atlantic 10 tournament, and getting back to the tournament for such a long time. It was I had such a big monkey on my back to get a team to the NCAA tournament.
Yeah.
Plus, you had the albatross that Rhode Island was carrying, having not been in it in 18 or 19 years. And then that same year, I just think I took winning the first round game that year versus Creighton, just what that did for my confidence as a coach going into that next year. And then it obviously put me on the map, on the radar for a job like UConn.
Right.
When it opened up, I think the timing of that put me here. Bad losses. I mean, that's like a Rolodex.
Just give me one, the one that like lingers the most. You texted me, I remember, like in Rhode Island, it'd be like a random Saturday, and you'd be like, the Oregon game still haunts me.
I mean, I want it to be proper, like I want a proper one. I don't want to do the Oregon game. I can't believe it's taking this long, but I'm like filtering through. I may go back to. I may go. Can I go? I'm going to probably go. I'm going to go St. Joe's game here, year two. Year two here, the bye game.
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with you and your epitome of brutality tweets. It doesn't have anything to do with that. But that was a gut. That was a gut punch. I think we got down like 25 high. We might have gotten down 28 in the first half. Ryan Daly was lighting us up. I can't imagine what our fans were thinking about me at halftime, but and I don't think that was a great St. Joe's team. I think that's what kind of made that. And we actually that year, by the end of the year, we were playing at a really high level. Now, Book Knight did not play in that game. We were back then. You couldn't buy a team. You had to actually go through the growing pains of building a culture and developing young players. There was no portal. There was no NIL. You had to go through the painstaking process that you could not avoid as a coach to actually build a program, which is now completely different in our sport. Which it takes some of the fun out of, I think one of the proudest things I'm about, or I've kind of felt on these jobs that I've been involved in college was kind of those micro wins that you get along the way, those setbacks, those unavoidable, those daily wins with culture where players are learning how to practice. You're taking a player as a freshman and you're bringing them along as a junior. And now he goes from a player that you couldn't win with to a championship player. A lot of the gratifying parts of that, rebuilding process now are kind of out of the job that way. But yeah.
But you bring up some interesting dynamics there because you talk about needing to win that game against Davidson at Rhode Island to keep your NCAA tournament hopes alive. And you also referenced in your book, Never Stop, Dan Hurley with Ian O'Connor on Amazon, will be available this fall. You also referenced the pressure you felt at Wagner coaching in a conference tournament in a one-bid league. Did you feel more pressure coaching in the Northeast Conference tournament at Wagner or at Rhode Island when there wasn't this surplus of bids than you do when you're chasing a national championship in the NCAA tournament at UConn?
Well, I will say, for my players, players at that level, that's a pressure cooker. It's such a completely different experience from any games you'll play. Throughout the year, like the bye games for the low Division Ones or maybe some of the mid majors. Those are opportunities of a lifetime for a mid to a low Division One player to put themselves on the map. If you don't get an opportunity as a player to hit the stage of March Madness and never get an opportunity to play in that or take the stage or etch yourself into the lore of that tournament by playing great in those games. You don't feel complete, and I think the players definitely feel that. I think you could feel the tension on campus at the college. They struggle to get attention all year, and to hear your name called to play a number one seed or it does so much for the school and the morale of the place and the finances of the athletic department and the college or university. So everyone feels that. For me, I'm pretty, I feel, I was torturing myself on the foreign trip. So before I was playing an 8th division Spanish team, and I had convinced myself that I was going to lose by 100. So for me, it's the same anxiety that I felt, whether I was a clueless high school coach at St. Benedict's or, going for a three-peat that obviously didn't work out.
How often do you think about winning another national title at UConn?
I mean, my mind will drift there sometimes because that's like the target. I mean, that's the thing that you're shooting for, but you are so process focused on just developing the players, addressing the areas that the way that we played last year that were not championship caliber, focusing on your own, like just the process. You're so dialed into your championship process to get back to producing championship results. But, the driver is, it's obviously, having one player in the NBA draft, what was disappointing. I think Liam's going to have an awesome career. Obviously, Alex could have been in if he decided to stay in. He would have had a chance to, catch the end of the first round. At worst, he would have been picked at the top of the second. So, we want more guys, and we want to be in a situation where we got more guys drafted, and and that we won the championship.
Well, let's wrap on this. What has to happen between now and late February, early March for UConn to again be vintage UConn entering the 2026 NCAA tournament?
Yeah, I mean, the things that we banked on, like I banked on certain things going into 23, like I banked on Jordan Hawkins doing what Jordan Hawkins did, we banked on Adama Sanogo, the development, the third year in the program, so the things that you're betting on, Teras Reed to play like a, potential All-American center, solo ball to take the next step. Alex Caravan looks physically like a much different player.
Yes.
The Jalen Stewarts, like the Silas Demerys, all the people that you're banking on to be able to fill the role that you need. You got to hit on most of those things. And then obviously,
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
And then you've got to, you also the defense. You're not winning anything. Our defense had a trickle down effect. We were still super efficient offensively in transition. We never got out in transition because our defense was bad. And it put too much stress on our half court offense. And although we still played offense at a very efficient level, you can't win anything with a top 80 defense. And, so all those things, the defense will get fixed. I've never coached a team in college that defended like that. That will not happen again. I can guarantee that. So I feel great about the team. I think it's a team that's going to be back in contention, and will look more like the previous year's teams than this past year.
Well, Dan, it's going to be a lot of fun to cover. Want to again plug the book. It's Never Stop, Dan Hurley with Ian O'Connor. You can pre-order now on Amazon. It will be released here in the fall as UConn again chases another deep run in the NCAA tournament. Dan, appreciate a couple minutes. Know how busy you are. Looking forward to another fun season. And as always, look forward to staying connected along the way. And
John, it was not a stipulation for you to promote the book as many times as you did. But I do appreciate you. You do you plugging the book there for me, my friend. And it's always great being on here with you. And I can't wait for the winter. But it's only August.
This is only August, but November 3rd is inching closer and closer.
I don't like your countdown, though. I don't like your countdown.
Why do you not like the countdown?
There's a certain. Your physiology as a coach changes as the season approaches, like that knot in your stomach. It doesn't start fully forming until, probably mid to late September, but just that daily reminder that is coming closer. No one needs to see that.
But I remember, I think
I don't want to block you or mute you.
Yeah.
I have muted other, members of the college basketball media.
I know you. But I remember when you were at Wagner, I think we were at like a camp. It was like Rob Kennedy's hoop group camp. And you like quote tweeted like a countdown tweet. And you were like, you just wrote, "This is like a cold shower for coaches."
I've almost quote tweeted you a couple times this summer. I've passed.
Was it a well-embedded moles tweet or a highly placed spies tweet? Like what were you going to quote tweet?
I think when you put our lineup in, I think I wanted to, what you projected our starting lineup, I wanted to just thank you for the text messages and phone calls from the parents and the agents. To the assistant coaches, to the assistant coaches, the positional coaches, the guys that recruited them.
I post a ranking of 45 teams every single day, and every single day that's tweeted sometime between 9 and 10 a.m. My projected starting lineup is out there, and it was the same starting lineup that I tweeted when I went to a UConn practice. I believe it was Aristotle. I believe it was it Aristotle. Aristotle said that, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence is then, by habit.
But you had to click on those tweets to actually, so they would have had to work harder to find that lineup. Where the problems are the direct tweet with the lineup. Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. We can all improve our craft. Dan, enjoy the Jersey Shore. Looking forward to obviously another great season. And this is only August.
All right, brother. See you.
That's UConn head coach Dan Hurley. I'm Jon Rothstein, and this is Inside College Basketball Now.